The conference room aboard the diplomatic station was silent, except for the hum of life support systems. Jake Morrison stood at attention, his uniform pressed to perfection, his face showing no emotion. He had been called here by Admiral Helen Price herself, and when an admiral called, you came without questions. Helen sat across from him, her fingers steepled together as she studied the soldier before her. Jake was 32 years old but looked older. 15 years of combat missions did that to a man. His eyes held the distant look of someone who had seen too much death, caused too much of it himself. "At ease, Commander," Helen said quietly. Jake relaxed marginally, but even at ease he looked ready to fight. It was in his bones now, that constant readiness. He had joined the military at 17, fresh from high school with dreams of serving humanity among the stars. Those dreams had been beaten out of him in the first year, replaced by harsh reality. Space was dangerous and humans had many enemies. "I suppose you're wondering why you're here," Helen continued. "Yes, Admiral. The Galactic Council has given humanity an ultimatum. We've been at war with the Valorian Empire for 5 years now. Border skirmishes, resource disputes, cultural misunderstandings that turned into combat. The Council says we need to prove we can control our violent nature, or they'll quarantine Earth. No more expansion. No more trade. We'll be isolated." Jake listened without interrupting. He had fought in those border skirmishes. He had killed Valorians, watched them kill his friends. The war was real and bloody, not some political game. "The solution they proposed is an ancient one," Helen said, sliding a tablet across the table. "A marriage bond between our species and theirs. A symbol of unity that will end the hostilities." Jake picked up the tablet and read through the proposal. His expression didn't change, but inside he felt something cold settle in his stomach. "They want me to marry a Valorian? Princess Lyra, to be specific. She's their emperor's daughter, 26 years old, and by all accounts a kind and gentle soul. She believes in peace and cooperation between species. The Valorian Empire is tired of war too. Their resources are depleted, their people exhausted." Jake set down the tablet. "With respect, Admiral, I'm a soldier. I don't know anything about diplomacy or marriage or playing nice with people who were trying to kill me last month." "I know exactly what you are, Jake. That's why we chose you." Helen leaned forward. "We need someone strong, someone who can protect this alliance if things go wrong. But we also need someone who can follow orders, who understands duty. You've never questioned a mission in 15 years of service, and this isn't a mission. This is a life. This is the most important mission humanity has ever faced," Helen corrected. "If this fails, we're done, quarantined, finished as a spacefaring species. You'll live on Crossroads Station, a joint facility between humans and Valorians. You'll continue your military duties in an advisory role, but your primary function will be as a symbol, living proof that humans and Valorians can coexist." Jake was quiet for a long moment. He thought about his life, what it had been so far. Combat, death, brief leaves where he didn't know how to relax, then back to combat. He had no family left. His parents had died in a shuttle accident when he was 20. He had friends, fellow soldiers, but no one close. The military was his life. "What does she know about me?" he asked. "That you're a decorated combat veteran. That you've served with distinction. That you're being offered as a gesture of good faith from humanity." Helen paused. "She doesn't know the details of your service record. She doesn't know about the battles, the kills, the things you've had to do. So I'm lying to her from the start. You're being diplomatic. There's a difference." Jake stood up and walked to the window. Outside, stars stretched in every direction, beautiful and cold and infinite. He had fought to protect humanity's right to travel among those stars. Maybe this was just another kind of fight. "When?" he asked. 2 weeks. The ceremony will be held here on Harmony's Gate neutral territory. Representatives from both species will attend. After that, you and Princess Lyra will transfer to Crossroads Station to begin your new lives." Jake turned back to Helen. "And if I say no? Then we find someone else. But Jake, I'm asking you because I trust you. I know you'll do whatever it takes to make this work. That's who you are." The 2 weeks passed too quickly. Jake went through the motions of preparation, attended briefings on Valorian culture, learned basic phrases in their language. He watched videos of Princess Lyra speaking at peace rallies, saw her working with refugees from the border conflicts. She seemed genuine in her desire for peace, but Jake couldn't shake his suspicion. He had learned not to trust easily. The day of the ceremony arrived. Jake stood in his dress uniform in a small preparation room, checking his appearance in the mirror one last time. He looked like a soldier playing dress-up. The formal clothes felt wrong, too restrictive. He wanted his combat gear, something familiar. Lieutenant Amy Burke, his former tactical officer, came to see him before the ceremony. She was one of the few people Jake considered a friend. "You look terrified," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "I've walked into combat zones that felt safer than this. At least in combat you know the enemy. Here you're marrying her." Jake managed a weak smile. "Thanks for the encouragement." Amy walked over and straightened his collar, which didn't need straightening. "Look, I know this isn't what you wanted, but maybe it's what you need. When was the last time you did something that wasn't about fighting? I don't remember." "Exactly. You're a good soldier, Jake, one of the best. But maybe it's time to learn how to be something else, too." The ceremony was formal and strange. Jake walked down an aisle lined with representatives from dozens of species, all watching to see if this crazy plan would work. At the end of the aisle stood Princess Lyra. She was smaller than he expected, delicate in her silver robes. Her skin had the faint blue tint common to Valorians, and her eyes were large and luminous, taking in everything. When their eyes met, Jake saw nervousness there and something else. Hope, maybe. They stood together while officials from both species spoke about unity and peace and new beginnings. Jake barely heard the words. He was too aware of Lyra standing beside him, too conscious of all the eyes watching them. This was supposed to save humanity, this marriage to a woman he didn't know. When it came time to speak their vows, Jake's voice was steady. He had trained himself to show no emotion under pressure, and that training served him now. Lyra's voice was softer, musical in the way Valorian voices were, but it didn't waver. They sealed the marriage with a traditional gesture from each culture. The human handshake and the Valorian touching of foreheads. When Lyra's forehead pressed against his, Jake caught her scent, something like flowers and rain. It was the first truly personal moment between them. The celebration afterward was loud and crowded. Diplomats congratulated them, offered toasts, spoke of the bright future ahead. Jake stood beside Lyra, playing his part, but inside he felt disconnected. This wasn't his world. These people with their fancy words and political games, they didn't understand what war really was. Finally, after hours of ceremony and celebration, they were allowed to leave. A shuttle took them to Crossroads Station, their new home. During the flight, they sat in silence. Jake didn't know what to say to this woman who was now his wife. When they reached their shared quarters, Jake stood awkwardly in the center of the room. The space was divided between human and Valorian aesthetics. Half familiar, half alien, just like this marriage. Lyra moved to a window and looked out at the stars. "I know this isn't what either of us wanted," she said softly, not turning around. "No," Jake agreed. He didn't believe in lying when truth was simpler. "But perhaps we can make the best of it, for our peoples if not for ourselves." Jake joined her at the window. Out there, humanity's future hung in the balance. This marriage, this alliance, it had to work. Too many lives depended on it. "I'll do my duty," he said. Lyra finally turned to look at him. In the starlight, her eyes seemed sad. "I hope we can be more than just duty to each other, Commander Morrison." "Jake. You can call me Jake." It was a small gesture, but it was all he had to offer. Lyra smiled slightly, the first real smile he had seen from her. "Then you may call me Lyra, not Princess, not Highness. Just Lyra." They stood together in the quiet quarters, two people from different worlds, bound together by politics and hope. Jake didn't know if this would work. He didn't know if a soldier like him could ever be what she needed. But he would try, because that's what soldiers did. They completed their missions, no matter how difficult or strange. The first month of marriage was awkward in ways combat had never prepared Jake for. He woke every morning at 5 a.m, years of military routine refusing to let him sleep longer. He would dress quietly in the darkness and head to the training bay, where he ran through combat drills for 2 hours. Physical training, weapons practice, tactical simulations. It was the only time he felt like himself. Lyra woke later, around 7. By the time she emerged from her sleeping chamber, Jake would be showered and ready for whatever diplomatic function filled their day. They would eat breakfast together in near silence. Jake didn't know what to talk about with her. Politics seemed dangerous, personal questions too intimate for strangers. "Do you always wake so early?" Lyra asked one morning, watching him eat his meal with mechanical efficiency. "Yes. Habit from military life." And the training? Is that required? Jake paused. No, but I need it. Need to stay sharp. In case of what? We're on a diplomatic station. We're safe here. Jake looked at her and she saw something in his eyes that made her uncomfortable. There's no such thing as completely safe. You always have to be ready. Lyra didn't push further. She was learning that Jake saw the world differently than she did. Where she saw peaceful corridors filled with diplomats, he saw potential ambush points. Where she saw friendly faces, he saw possible threats. It was exhausting just thinking about living that way. Their days fell into a pattern. Jake attended security briefings and advised the Joint Human-Valorian Defense Force. Lyra worked with the Cultural Exchange Program, trying to build bridges between their peoples. In the evenings, they were expected to appear together at various social functions, presenting a united front. Jake hated the social functions. He stood rigid in his dress uniform, responding to questions with brief, polite answers that revealed nothing. Lyra, on the other hand, was graceful at these events. She knew how to make conversation, how to put people at ease, how to navigate the complex social rules that made no sense to Jake. You could try smiling occasionally. Lyra suggested one evening as they walked back to their quarters after a particularly long reception. I'm not good at pretending. It's not pretending. It's being polite. In combat, being polite gets you killed. You act, you react, you survive. These games people play with words and fake smiles, I don't understand them. Lyra stopped walking and turned to face him. Jake, we're not in combat. This is our life now. You need to try to adapt. I am trying. His voice was flat, but she heard frustration underneath. She softened. I know, I'm sorry. This is difficult for both of us. They continued walking in silence. When they reached their quarters, Jake immediately checked the security panel, verifying all locks and monitoring systems were functioning. Another habit Lyra had learned not to question. Would you like some tea? Lyra offered, moving toward the kitchen area of their quarters. No, thank you. I'm going to review tomorrow's security protocols. It's late. Can't it wait until morning? Jake was already pulling up files on his datapad. I don't sleep much anyway. Lyra watched him for a moment, this man who was her husband but still a stranger. She wondered if he would ever let his guard down, ever stop being a soldier long enough to be a person. The second month brought a small breakthrough. Lyra had arranged for a section of the station to be converted into a garden, growing plants from various worlds, including Valoria. She spent many afternoons there, tending to the flowers and trees. It was her escape, her piece of home. One day, Jake finished his training early and found himself with an hour before his next meeting. On impulse, he went looking for Lyra. The security officer on duty directed him to the gardens. He found her kneeling beside a bed of blue flowers, her hands covered in soil. She looked up in surprise when she heard his footsteps. Jake, is something wrong? No, I just had some free time. He stood awkwardly, not sure why he had come. Lyra smiled. Would you like to help? I'm transplanting these moonflowers. They need more space to grow. Jake almost said no. Gardening seemed pointless, inefficient. But something in Lyra's expression made him pause. She looked hopeful, and he realized how rare it was to see her look at him that way. I don't know anything about plants. I can teach you. It's not complicated. She patted the ground beside her. Jake knelt down, feeling ridiculous in his uniform. Lyra showed him how to dig around the roots carefully, how to transfer the plant without damaging it, how to pack the soil firmly around the base. Her hands moved with practiced ease, and Jake found himself watching her instead of the flowers. These moonflowers only bloom at night, Lyra explained as they worked. On Valoria, we have a tradition of sitting in moonflower gardens during the summer months. Families gather, tell stories, share food. It's peaceful. Sounds nice, Jake said, though he had no reference for such gatherings. His childhood had been normal enough, but his adult life had been all military. What did your family do for traditions? Lyra asked. Jake was quiet for a moment. My parents died when I was 20. Before that, we didn't have many traditions. Regular family, nothing special. I'm sorry about your parents, it was a long time ago. They worked in silence for a while. Jake found the repetitive motion of digging and planting oddly calming. It required focus, but not the constant vigilance his training demanded. He could let his mind rest slightly. There, Lyra said finally, sitting back to admire their work. The moonflowers have room to grow now. Thank you for helping. Jake looked at the transplanted flowers. They seemed fragile, delicate. He didn't understand how something so weak could survive. But Lyra was smiling, genuinely pleased, and he found himself almost smiling back. "I could come back tomorrow if you need more help," he heard himself offer. Lyra's smile widened. "I would like that." It became a routine. After his morning training, Jake would spend an hour in the gardens with Lyra. He learned the names of Valorian plants, learned which ones needed more water, which preferred shade. Lyra talked while they worked, telling him stories about Valoria, about her childhood in the palace, about her hopes for peace. Jake mostly listened, but occasionally he would share something too. Brief stories from his early military days before the fighting got serious. He edited out the violence, the death, all the things that made him what he was. He gave her the sanitized version of his life. Lieutenant Amy Burke visited Crossroads for a tactical review in the 3rd month. She met Jake for lunch in the officers' mess, studying him with open curiosity. "You look different," she said. "Different how?" "Less like you're about to shoot someone. More relaxed, maybe." Jake shrugged. "I'm adapting." "And how is married life? Is the princess settling in?" "Lyra. Her name is Lyra." Jake realized he had corrected Amy automatically, defending his wife without thinking about it. Amy raised her eyebrows. "Lyra, right, so things are going well?" "They're going. We have a routine now. It's not what I expected, but it's manageable." "Do you love her?" The question caught Jake off guard. "That wasn't part of the mission parameters. I'm not asking as your tactical officer. I'm asking as your friend." Jake stared at his food. "I don't know what love feels like. I respect her. I'm committed to making this work." "Isn't that enough?" "For a mission, yes. For a marriage, I'm not sure." That conversation stayed with Jake. He found himself watching Lyra more carefully, trying to understand what he felt. She was kind, patient with his social awkwardness, genuinely trying to make their situation work. She was beautiful in a way that was alien but appealing. When she smiled, really smiled, it changed her whole face. But was that love? Jake didn't know. He had never been in love before. His life had been about duty, survival, mission completion. Emotions were things he had learned to suppress because they interfered with judgment. One evening, they were attending a formal dinner with various ambassadors. Jake stood beside Lyra as usual, half listening to the conversation while constantly scanning the room. It was automatic now, assessing every person, every entrance, every potential threat. Ambassador Paul Carter, representing the human colonies, was holding court nearby. He was loud, his laugh booming across the room. Jake didn't like him, though he couldn't point to a specific reason. "Just instinct, Princess Lyra," Paul said, approaching with a glass in hand. "You look lovely this evening." "Marriage to our stern Commander Morrison must be quite an adjustment." Lyra smiled politely. "It has been an adjustment for both of us, Ambassador. But we're managing well." Managing. What a diplomatic word. Paul's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Tell me, do you ever worry that you've married a weapon? Our commander here has quite the reputation. Very efficient. Very deadly." Jake felt his jaw tighten, but before he could respond, Lyra spoke. "I married a soldier, Ambassador Carter. There's a difference between a soldier and a weapon. A weapon has no choice. A soldier chooses to serve, chooses to protect. Jake makes his own choices." Paul looked taken aback by the sharp response. He mumbled something about meaning no offense and moved away. Jake looked at Lyra in surprise. "You didn't have to defend me." "Yes, I did. You're my husband." That's what partners do. Something shifted in that moment. Lyra had stood up for him, had defended him against criticism when she could have stayed silent or even agreed. It was such a small thing, but to Jake it meant everything. Someone had chosen to be on his side. The Festival of Unity was scheduled for the 3-month anniversary of the marriage. Crossroads Station was transformed, decorated with banners and lights from a dozen different species. Delegates arrived from across the sector, all coming to celebrate the success of the Human-Valorian Alliance. To everyone's surprise, the marriage had worked. Jake and Lyra appeared stable, committed, a genuine symbol of peace. Jake hated every minute of the preparation. The station was too crowded, too many unknown people walking the corridors. His security instincts screamed warnings, but when he tried to express his concerns, he was dismissed. "Commander, you worry too much," said Captain Kevin Grant, the station's official security chief. "We've screened every delegate, every visitor. There's no threat here. There's always a threat, Jake insisted. We should increase patrols, add more checkpoints. And make our guests feel like they're in a military zone? No, this is a celebration. We need to project peace, not paranoia. Jake wanted to argue that paranoia had kept him alive for 15 years, but he knew it was pointless. Kevin was competent enough, but he had never seen real combat. He didn't understand that attacks came when you least expected them, that the worst threats looked friendly until they struck. The morning of the festival, Jake woke earlier than usual. It was 3 in the morning and he couldn't sleep. He dressed and went to the security center, pulling up the station's monitoring systems. Everything looked normal. Delegates sleeping in their quarters, night shift personnel at their posts, systems functioning within normal parameters. But Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He spent 2 hours reviewing security footage, checking patrol schedules, verifying the background checks on every visitor. Nothing stood out. Maybe Kevin was right. Maybe he was being paranoid. When he returned to their quarters, Lyra was awake, practicing her speech for the festival. She looked up when he entered. You're up early, even for you. Couldn't sleep. You're worried about today. It wasn't a question. Always worried. It's my job. Lyra set down her notes and crossed to where he stood. Over the past 3 months, physical closeness had become easier between them. Not romantic exactly, but comfortable. She reached up and touched his face, a Valorian gesture of affection she had taught him. I trust you to keep us safe. Jake, I always have. Her words should have been reassuring, but they only made the weight on his shoulders heavier. What if he was wrong? What if his instincts were failing him? What if he let her down? The festival began at noon. The main assembly hall was packed with delegates from across the sector. Humans, Valorians, and representatives from the Galactic Council all gathered to hear speeches about peace and cooperation. Jake stood at the side of the stage, watching the crowd while Lyra prepared to speak. His eyes never stopped moving. Face after face, looking for anything wrong. His hand rested near his sidearm, hidden beneath his formal jacket. Kevin had objected to Jake carrying a weapon to a peace festival, but Jake had refused to attend without it. Eventually, Kevin had given in. Lyra stepped up to the podium, her silver robes catching the light. She began to speak about unity, about the progress they had made, about the future they were building together. Her voice was clear and confident. She had become good at these speeches. Jake divided his attention between Lyra and the crowd. Most people were paying attention to her words, but in the back, near the eastern entrance, he noticed a group of 3 humans and 2 Valorians who weren't watching the stage. They were watching the security personnel, tracking their movements. Jake's instincts flared. Something was wrong. He touched his earpiece, opening a private channel to Kevin. Security chief, we have a problem. Eastern entrance, 5 individuals acting suspicious. Morrison, not now. Let the princess finish her speech. Kevin, I'm serious. Something's not right. Before Kevin could respond, the explosion hit. The eastern docking bay erupted in a ball of fire. The blast was far enough from the assembly hall that it didn't kill anyone there, but the shockwave knocked people off their feet. Alarms began screaming. Emergency lights flashed red. Jake was moving before the sound of the explosion faded. He vaulted onto the stage and grabbed Lyra, pulling her down behind the podium as the crowd erupted into panic. His training took over completely. The diplomat, the husband, all of that vanished. What remained was the soldier, the combat veteran who had survived 15 years of war. Stay down, he ordered Lyra, his voice hard and cold. He pulled his sidearm and scanned the room. The 5 suspicious individuals were moving now, pulling weapons from under their clothes. Not primitive weapons either. Military-grade plasma rifles. This is Commander Morrison, Jake said into his comm, his voice cutting through the chaos. We are under coordinated attack. All security personnel, lock down critical systems and begin evacuation protocols. This is not a drill. The attackers opened fire on the crowd. People screamed, ran, died. Jake saw 2 security officers go down in the first seconds. Kevin Grant took a plasma bolt to the chest, his body armor failing against the high-powered weapon. He was dead before he hit the ground. Jake returned fire with cold precision. 2 shots, center mass on the nearest attacker. The man went down. Jake was already moving, using the panicked crowd as cover, working his way toward Lyra's position. She was still behind the podium, frozen in shock. Another explosion rocked the station. Life support section this time. These weren't random terrorists. This was a professional operation, designed to cripple the station and kill specific targets. Targets like Lyra. Jake reached the podium and grabbed Lyra's arm. We need to move now. Jake, what's happening? Insurgents. They want to destroy the Alliance. They want to kill you. He pulled her toward a maintenance access panel he had memorized during his security reviews. Stay behind me and do exactly what I say. They moved through corridors filled with smoke and screaming people. Jake's mind was operating at combat speed, processing everything. 3 more explosions meant the attackers had hit communications, weapons systems, and backup power. The station was crippled. He killed 2 more attackers on the way to the assembly hall where Lyra had been speaking. They were wearing mixed human and Valorian equipment, confirmation that this was a joint operation by extremists from both species, people who wanted the war to continue. The assembly hall was chaos. Bodies on the floor, wounded people crying for help, security personnel trying to organize a defense. Jake's security detail for Lyra was dead, all 4 of them taken out in the initial attack. Commander Morrison, Lieutenant Sam Hughes called out. He was young, barely 25, and his hands shook as he held his weapon. What are your orders? Orders. Jake's mind switched fully into command mode. Get the wounded to the medical bay. Organize a defensive perimeter around the council chambers. Move the delegates there at his reinforced walls and independent life support. And you? I'm getting Princess Lyra somewhere safe. Then I'm going after the attackers. Jake led Lyra through maintenance tunnels, taking a route the attackers wouldn't expect. His mind was cataloging everything. 5 insurgents initially visible, but the coordination of the attack suggested at least 10 total. Military training on all of them. Access to station schematics. This had been planned for weeks, maybe months. They reached a secure room Jake had prepared for exactly this situation. Kevin had thought he was being paranoid when Jake insisted on having a safe room. Paranoia was looking pretty smart now. Jake sealed the door and checked Lyra for injuries. Are you hurt? She shook her head, but her hands were trembling. Jake, what you did back there, the way you moved, the way you fought, I've never seen anything like it. I'm a soldier. This is what I do. No. Lyra's voice was strained. That wasn't just being a soldier. You killed those people without hesitation, without emotion, like it was nothing. Jake looked at her and saw fear in her eyes. Not fear of the situation. Fear of him. It felt like a knife in his chest. They were trying to kill you. Trying to kill everyone in that hall. I did what was necessary. But how can you do it so easily? How can you take lives without even pausing? Jake's jaw tightened. Because I've done it before. Hundreds of times. It's what I was trained for. What I'm built for. You wanted to know what kind of man you married. This is it. I'm a weapon, Lyra. A weapon that kills efficiently and effectively. That's all I've ever been. The words hung in the air between them. The truth finally spoken after 3 months of pretending to be something else. An explosion rocked the safe room. The attackers had found them. Jake checked his weapon. Half a magazine left plus 2 spare magazines. Enough for a fight if he was smart about it. He moved to the door controls. Jake, what are you doing? They know we're here. They'll breach this door eventually, and when they do, we'll be trapped. Better to meet them on my terms. That's suicide. Jake looked back at her, this woman he had been trying to protect, trying not to scare with what he truly was. No, it's what I'm good at. He opened the door and stepped into the corridor. 5 armed insurgents were approaching, weapons raised. They saw Jake and opened fire. He was already moving, rolling behind a support beam as plasma bolts scorched the air where he had been standing. Jake returned fire with mechanical precision. 1 shot, 1 kill. The first attacker went down. Jake moved again, using his... The medical bay was overwhelmed. 23 dead, 47 wounded, and the numbers kept changing as rescue teams searched the damaged sections of Crossroads Station. Jake sat in a treatment room while a medic bandaged his shoulder, his eyes distant and unfocused. Admiral Helen Price had arrived within hours of the attack, taking command of the situation. She found Jake in the medical bay and pulled him aside into a private room. Report? Commander. Jake gave her a detailed account of the attack, the tactical decisions he had made, the insurgents he had killed. His voice was flat, mechanical. Helen listened without interrupting. You saved a lot of lives today, Jake, including Princess Lyra's. The Alliance owes you. The Alliance should have listened when I said security was inadequate. Helen's expression tightened. Captain Grant paid for that mistake with his life. But that's not why I'm here. The Galactic Council is meeting right now to discuss what happened. There are voices calling for the Alliance to be dissolved, for humanity to be sanctioned. Because we were attacked? Because you killed so efficiently. Helen pulled up a video file on her datapad. Station security captured everything, Jake. We're going to show you something. The video played. Jake watched himself move through the corridors, engaging the insurgents. From an outside perspective, it was terrifying. He moved like death itself, precise and unstoppable. Every motion was economical, every shot perfectly placed. There was no hesitation, no mercy, no humanity in those movements. Just cold, efficient violence. That's what some of the council members saw, Helen said, and it scared them. It reminded them why they're afraid of humans. We're too good at killing, Jake, too comfortable with violence. I was protecting my wife, protecting the station. I know that. You know that. But the council sees a human soldier who killed 7 people in combat without breaking a sweat. They see exactly what they were afraid of. Jake closed his eyes. He had known this would happen eventually. You couldn't hide what you were forever. The soldier, the killer, the weapon. It had been there all along, just waiting for the right situation to emerge. What about Lyra? He asked. Helen hesitated. She's giving testimony to the council now. Jake, I need to prepare you. She's frightened. Of the situation, of what she saw of you. I know. I saw it in her eyes. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The chamber was packed with representatives, all talking at once. Ambassador Claire Phillips stood at the human delegation's position, her face grave as she defended Jake's actions. Commander Morrison did what was necessary to protect innocent lives, Claire argued. The insurgents were armed with military weapons, had killed security personnel, and were clearly intent on causing mass casualties. He responded appropriately. Chancellor Theris of the Valorian Empire rose slowly. He was old, his blue skin pale with age, but his voice carried authority. Ambassador Phillips, no one questions that Commander Morrison's actions were effective. We question whether they were appropriate for a man who is supposed to represent peace. He is a soldier. Soldiers protect peace through strength. He is a weapon, another voice called out. Council member Vex of the Tridian Alliance, a species that had clashed with humans before. We have all seen the recordings. The cold efficiency, the lack of hesitation, the ease with which he killed. This is why we fear humanity. You build soldiers who are too good at killing, too comfortable with violence. The debate raged for hours. Some defended Jake, others condemned him. The human Valorian Alliance was on the verge of collapse, and everyone knew it. Finally, Lyra was called to testify. She entered the chamber in simple robes, her face composed but her hands trembling slightly. Jake watched from a viewing gallery, unable to be present in the main chamber. Princess Lyra, Chancellor Theris said gently, you have lived with Commander Morrison for 3 months. You were there during the attack. Tell us in your own words what you witnessed. Lyra stood at the speaker's podium, and for a moment she said nothing. Jake could see her struggling, trying to find the right words. I was frightened, she began. When the explosion started, when people began dying, I was frozen in fear. But Jake, Commander Morrison, he moved immediately. He knew what to do, how to protect me, how to protect everyone. He saved my life. No one disputes his effectiveness, Princess. But were you frightened of him? Of what he became during the attack? Lyra's hands gripped the podium. Yes, I was frightened. The way he moved, the way he fought, it was like watching a completely different person. Cold, efficient, deadly. In that moment, he wasn't my husband. He was a weapon. The chamber erupted in conversation. Jake felt something break inside him. To hear Lyra say it, to hear the fear in her voice, it confirmed what he had always known. He was a monster wearing a human face, pretending to be something he could never be. But Lyra wasn't finished. I was frightened of him, she continued, her voice growing stronger. But I've spent the last 3 days thinking about what I saw. And I've realized something. Commander Morrison didn't create the violence that day. He responded to it. The insurgents, the extremists who attacked us, they chose violence. They chose to kill innocent people to make their point. Jake chose to stop them. She looked up at the gallery where Jake sat, meeting his eyes across the distance. My husband is a soldier. He was trained to fight, trained to kill when necessary. That's his nature, what years of service have made him. But being built for war doesn't mean he wants war. It means he's capable of ending it when others start it. There's a difference, Chancellor Theris leaned forward. You're saying we should accept humanity's violent nature because it can be directed toward protection? I'm saying we should recognize that strength isn't the same as aggression. Jake Morrison is strong, yes. Deadly, yes. But he uses that strength in service of others. He didn't attack anyone. He defended people who couldn't defend themselves. Isn't that what we should want? People who are capable of violence but choose to use it only in defense of others. The debate continued for another hour, but Lyra's testimony had shifted something. When the council finally voted, it was close, but the alliance survived. Jake would remain on Crossroads Station, but with increased oversight. Regular psychological evaluations, restrictions on his security role. It was a compromise that satisfied no one but kept the peace intact. Jake returned to their quarters late that night. He had expected Lyra to avoid him, to request separate living arrangements. Instead, she was waiting for him in the common area, 2 cups of tea prepared. "Sit," she said. "We need to talk." Jake sat, rigid and uncomfortable. He didn't touch the tea. "I meant what I said to the council," Lyra began, "about you being frightening about what I saw during the attack. I need you to understand, Jake. When I watched you fight, when I saw how easily you killed those people, it terrified me. Not because I thought you would hurt me, but because I realized I had been living with someone I didn't truly understand." "I know. I'm sorry. Don't apologize." Lyra's voice was firm. "You saved my life. You saved dozens of lives. But Jake, I can't keep pretending that you're something you're not. I can't keep ignoring what you are. A weapon, a killer, a soldier," Lyra corrected. "There's a difference. A weapon has no choice, no will of its own. You choose how to use your skills, when to fight, who to protect. That makes you a person, not a weapon." Jake looked at her, surprised. "After what you saw, you still believe that?" "I have to believe it, because the alternative is too frightening to accept." Lyra reached across the table and took his hand. "But I need you to be honest with me now. No more hiding who you are. No more pretending to be a diplomat when you're a soldier. Can you do that?" Jake thought about it. For 3 months, he had been trying to be what everyone else needed him to be. The symbol of peace, the diplomatic husband, the man who had left violence behind. But that had been a lie. The violence was still there, just hidden beneath a thin layer of civilization. "I don't know how to be anything but a soldier," he admitted. "I've tried to be what you need, what the Alliance needs. But when the attack came, all of that disappeared. What remained was the killer, the weapon you're afraid of." "Then maybe we need to stop trying to make you into something else," Lyra said. "Maybe we need to accept that you're a soldier and figure out how that fits into our marriage, into our life together." "The council won't like it. They want me to be less threatening, less violent. The council isn't married to you." "I am." Lyra squeezed his hand. "Jake, I'm not going to lie and say I'm not still frightened sometimes. What you're capable of, what you've done, it's terrifying. But I'm also grateful. Without you, I would be dead. The Alliance would be dead. Maybe having someone who is built for war is exactly what we need to maintain peace." Jake felt something loosen in his chest, a tension he had been carrying for months. "You're not leaving?" "No, we made vows, Jake, for better or worse." "This is definitely in the worst category, but I'm not walking away." They sat in silence for a long moment, hands joined across the table. It wasn't resolution exactly, but it was honest. No more pretending, no more hiding. Just the truth, uncomfortable as it was. "I'll need time," Lyra said finally, "to process what I saw, to understand what it means to be married to someone like you. And you'll need to be patient with me when I'm frightened or uncertain." The weeks following the attack were difficult for everyone on Crossroads Station. Repairs were ongoing, new security measures implemented, and counselors were brought in to help those traumatized by the violence. Jake found himself in a strange position. He was both hero and cautionary tale, the man who had saved lives but also reminded everyone why humans were feared. The mandatory psychological evaluations were uncomfortable. Dr. Lisa Chen, a human psychologist assigned to Jake's case, met with him twice a week in her office. "How are you sleeping, Commander?" she asked during their 3rd session. "Same as always. 4, maybe 5 hours a night." "In the nightmares?" Jake shifted in his chair. "I've had nightmares for 15 years. Combat does that. The attack didn't change anything. But you killed 7 people that day. Doesn't that affect you?" "Should it?" Jake's voice was flat. "They were trying to kill innocent people. I stopped them. That's what soldiers do." Lisa made notes on her datapad. "Commander, I'm not judging you. I'm trying to understand how you process violence. Most people who kill, even in self-defense, experience trauma, guilt, Flashbacks, emotional distress. You seem remarkably unaffected. I'm affected. I just don't show it. Can you describe how it affects you? Jake was quiet for a long moment. How could he explain to someone who had never been in combat what it felt like? The weight of taking a life, even when necessary, was something that never fully left you, but you learned to carry it, to compartmentalize it, to function despite it. Every person I've killed is in here, Jake said, tapping his head. Every face, every name when I knew them. I carry all of them. But if I let that weight stop me from functioning, then I can't protect the people who are still alive. So I carry it and keep moving. That's a heavy burden, Commander. It's the burden every soldier carries. We do the ugly work so others don't have to. We live with the weight so others can live without it. Lisa studied him carefully. And Princess Lyra? How is your relationship with her after the attack? Different. More honest? Can you elaborate? Jake thought about the past few weeks with Lyra. The awkwardness had returned, but it was a different kind of awkwardness. She knew what he was now, had seen him at his most violent, and she was trying to reconcile that knowledge with the man she had been learning to care for. She's not pretending anymore, Jake said. Neither am I. We're figuring out how to make it work without hiding who we really are. Life on Crossroads settled into a new routine. Jake's role in security was expanded despite some council members' objections. The attack had proven that his instincts were valuable, that his experience was necessary. But he worked under closer supervision now, required to justify every decision to multiple oversight committees. He also continued spending mornings in the garden with Lyra. That hadn't changed. If anything, it became more important. A space where they could be just two people rather than symbols or political figures. One morning, about a month after the attack, Lyra was transplanting new flowers when she paused and looked at Jake. Can I ask you something personal? Of course. How many people have you killed? Jake's hand stilled in the soil. It was a question she had never asked before, one he had been waiting for. I don't know the exact number. In combat, you don't always know. But if I had to estimate, over 100, maybe more. Lyra was quiet, processing that information. And you remember all of them? Like you told Dr. Chen? Not all of them. The ones from distance and the chaos of battle, those blur together. But the ones I killed up close when I could see their faces, yes. I remember those. Doesn't that haunt you? Every day. Jake looked at her, making sure she understood. I'm not a monster who enjoys killing, Lyra. Every life I take is a weight I carry. But I'm also a soldier who understands that sometimes violence is necessary to prevent greater violence. Those insurgents who attacked us, they would have killed you and dozens of others if I hadn't stopped them. So I carry the weight of stopping them and I accept that burden. How do you live with it? I focus on who I saved rather than who I killed. It doesn't erase the weight, but it gives it meaning. Lyra returned to her planting, but Jake could see her thinking about his words. She was trying to understand him. Really understand him, not just accept him. It was more than he had hoped for. Lieutenant Amy Burke returned to Crossroads for an extended assignment, taking over some of the security duties. She found Jake in the training bay one morning, running through combat drills with an intensity that bordered on obsessive. You're going to hurt yourself training that hard, she said. Leaning against the doorframe, Jake lowered his weapon and turned to face her. Staying sharp keeps people alive. The attack wasn't your fault, Jake. You couldn't have prevented it. I knew something was wrong. I felt it. But no one listened. Amy walked over and sat on a bench, gesturing for Jake to join her. That's the burden of being right. You warned them, they ignored you, and people died. But you can't carry that guilt. You saved lives that day. Focus on that. Everyone keeps saying that. Like it's supposed to make it easier. It doesn't make it easier. It just makes it bearable. Amy studied her old friend. How are things with Lyra? Really? Jake sat down beside her. Complicated. She saw what I am during the attack. The real me, not the diplomatic version. And she's trying to accept it, but I can see the fear in her eyes sometimes. Does she have reason to fear you? No, I would never hurt her. But she's afraid of what I'm capable of, what I've done, and I can't blame her for that. You care about her, Amy observed. More than you expected to. Jake didn't answer immediately. Did he care about Lyra? 3 months ago, he would have said this was just a mission, a duty he had accepted. But now, after watching her defend him to the council, after seeing her try to understand him despite her fear, yes, he cared. Maybe more than he should. She's my wife. Of course I care about her. That's not what I asked. Jake stood up, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. I need to get back to work. Jake, Amy called after him. It's okay to care about someone. It's okay to want something beyond duty and mission completion. You're allowed to be human. But that was the problem, wasn't it? Jake had spent so long being a soldier that he didn't know how to be just a person anymore. The lines had blurred until he couldn't tell where the soldier ended and the man began. That evening, Jake and Lyra attended a small reception for delegates who had remained on Crossroads after the attack. Many had left immediately, frightened by the violence. Those who stayed were either very brave or very committed to the alliance. Ambassador Claire Phillips approached them during the reception. Commander Princess Lyra, I wanted to thank you both personally. Your testimony to the Council, Lyra, it saved the alliance. And Jake, your actions during the attack saved lives. Just doing my duty, Ambassador, Jake said. It was more than duty. You could have evacuated, gotten yourself and Lyra to safety. Instead, you stayed and fought. That's courage, not just duty. After Claire moved on, Lyra turned to Jake. She's right, you know. You didn't have to stay and fight. Why did you? Because people needed help. Because running wasn't an option. But it was an option. You chose to stay, chose to fight. That's important, Jake. You made a choice. They found a quiet corner away from the crowd. Jake had learned that Lyra needed these moments of privacy during social events. Little breaks from the constant performance of being a princess. I've been thinking about what you said, Lyra began. About carrying the weight of the people you've killed. About focusing on who you saved rather than who you stopped. And I think I'm starting to understand. You're not a weapon that kills indiscriminately. You're a person who makes hard choices to protect others. The killing is a consequence of protection, not the goal itself. That's what I've always tried to be. Lyra looked at him seriously. Then help me understand how to be married to someone like you. Because I want this to work, Jake. Not just for the alliance, not just for political reasons. I want our marriage to be real. Jake felt something shift inside him. Real how? Real like two people who care about each other. Who support each other. Who are partners, not just symbols. Lyra reached out and took his hand. I know I'm still frightened sometimes. I know I don't fully understand what you've been through, what you've had to do. But I'm willing to try if you are. I've been trying since day one. No, you've been performing duty since day one. I'm asking you to try something harder. Try letting me in. Try trusting me with who you really are, not just the soldier, but the person underneath. Jake looked at their joined hands. I'm not sure there is a person underneath anymore. The soldier is what I am. I don't believe that. The man who spends mornings in the garden with me. Who learns the names of flowers he doesn't care about because I do. Who stands between me and danger without thinking about his own safety. That's not just a soldier. That's a person who cares. Caring makes you weak in combat. Makes you hesitate. Maybe, but we're not in combat all the time. And when we're not, I need you to be more than a soldier. I need you to be my husband. Jake didn't know how to respond to that. For so long, being a soldier had been enough. It had been all he needed to be, all anyone expected him to be. But Lyra was asking for something more, something he wasn't sure he could give. 6 months had passed since Jake and Lyra's marriage, 3 months since the attack on Crossroads Station. The station had been rebuilt, stronger than before. New security measures were in place, designed by Jake himself. The alliance between humans and Valorians had not only survived but was growing stronger. Jake stood in the garden at dawn, watching the moonflowers Lyra had planted months ago finally bloom. They only opened at night or in low light, their petals a soft blue that reminded him of Lyra's skin tone. He had soil under his fingernails, calluses on his hands from both weapons training and gardening tools. The combination felt strange but right. Lyra joined him, carrying 2 cups of coffee. It had become their morning ritual. Jake would finish his combat training, spend an hour in the garden, and Lyra would bring coffee when she woke. They would sit together and talk about their plans for the day, about nothing important, about everything that mattered. The flowers are beautiful, Lyra said, sitting beside him on the bench they had installed last month. You were right about them. They needed time to establish roots before they could bloom. Like us, Lyra said with a slight smile. Jake looked at her, this woman who had somehow become important to him, more than duty, more than political necessity. Somewhere in the past 6 months, between the awkward dinners and the garden work and the terror of the attack, she had become his partner. His friend, something more that he was still learning to define. Like us, he agreed. The Galactic Council had requested that Jake and Lyra visit Earth the following month. A tour of humanity's homeworld, strengthening the alliance, showing that the marriage was successful. Admiral Helen Price had arrived at Crossroads to discuss the details. They met in Jake's security office, a space that had become his domain. Maps of the station covered the walls, security protocols stacked on his desk, the organized chaos of someone who took their job seriously. The Earth visit will be heavily publicized, Helen explained. Every major city wants you to appear. The Council sees this as proof that the Alliance is working, that humans and Valorians can coexist peacefully. No pressure then, Jake said dryly. You've handled worse. But Jake, I need to know, how are you really doing? The psychological evaluations say you're fine, but I want to hear it from you. Jake considered the question. How was he doing? 6 months ago, he would have said he was completing his mission, fulfilling his duty. Now the answer was more complicated. I'm adapting, learning to be something other than just a soldier. And how's that going? Harder than any combat mission I've ever had. But Lyra helps. She's patient with me, helps me understand things I never had to think about before. Helen smiled. You care about her. I can hear it in your voice. Is that a problem? No, Commander. It's exactly what we hoped would happen. A marriage of convenience becoming something real. That's the best proof that this alliance can work. After Helen left, Jake found Lyra in the cultural center where she worked. She was teaching a group of human children about Valorian art. Her face animated as she explained the significance of different colors and patterns. Jake watched from the doorway, seeing a side of her that the formal diplomatic functions never revealed. When the class ended, Lyra noticed him waiting. How long have you been standing there? Long enough to see you in your element. You're good with children. I love teaching. On Valoria, I worked with refugee children from the war. It was the one thing I could do that felt meaningful. She gathered her materials. Did you need something? Just wanted to see you. Lyra stopped and looked at him in surprise. Just wanted to see me? Jake Morrison, was that almost romantic? Jake felt his face heat slightly. I'm trying. Amy says I need to work on expressing myself. Amy is wise, and I appreciate the effort. Lyra crossed to him and took his hand, a gesture that had become natural between them. Walk with me? They walked through the station's commercial district, where humans and Valorians mixed freely now. The attack had frightened people, but it had also strengthened their resolve. The extremists had failed to destroy the Alliance. If anything, they had made it stronger. I've been thinking about the Earth visit, Lyra said. I'm nervous. Why? You're good at these public appearances. Because it's your home, Jake, your world. I'll be the alien there, the outsider. What if your people don't accept me? Jake stopped walking and turned to face her. Then they'll have to deal with me. You're my wife, Lyra. Anyone who doesn't accept you doesn't accept me. And I've never cared much about what people think of me anyway. Lyra smiled. You've changed, you know. 6 months ago, you would have said it was your duty to protect me. Now you say I'm your wife. That's different, is it? Yes, duty is obligation. Calling me your wife is choice. It means you want this, not just that you're following orders. Jake thought about that. She was right. Somewhere along the way, this marriage had stopped being a mission and become something real. He wasn't sure when it happened, but it had. I do want this, he admitted. I want you. Not because anyone ordered me to, but because you matter to me. It was perhaps the most emotionally open statement Jake had made in his entire adult life. Lyra's eyes widened, then softened with something that looked like affection. You matter to me too. Jake, more than I expected when this started. They continued walking, hands linked. Two people from different worlds finding common ground. It wasn't perfect. Lyra still got frightened sometimes when Jake shifted into combat mode, when his soldier's instincts took over. And Jake still struggled with the emotional openness that Lyra needed, the ability to express feelings that went beyond tactical assessments, but they were trying. Both of them to make this work. Later that week, Jake received an encrypted message from Earth's Defense Command. Intelligence had uncovered another extremist cell, this one planning attacks on multiple Alliance targets. They wanted Jake's tactical assessment and potentially his involvement in stopping them. Jake studied the intelligence data for hours. The cell was well organized, well funded, and had members in both human and Valorian territories. They were planning something big, designed to completely destroy the Alliance. He could have deployed immediately. Part of him wanted to get back into the field and do what he did best. But instead, he forwarded the intelligence to the Joint Security Task Force he had been training over the past 3 months. Lieutenant David Clark led the human contingent of the task force. Commander Venn led the Valorian side. Jake had trained them both, taught them to work together. To combine human tactical aggression with Valorian strategic patience. "You're not coming with us?" David asked when Jake briefed them on the mission. "You're ready. You don't need me. With respect, Commander, you're the best tactical mind we have. This mission would be easier with you." Jake shook his head. "I trained you so you could handle situations like this without me. It's time to prove the Alliance works on all levels. Not just because one human soldier is good at fighting. Besides, I have other responsibilities now." After the briefing, Amy found Jake in his office. "You're really not going?" "No, my mission is here now. Your mission, or your choice." Jake looked at her. "Both. For the first time in my life, my mission and my choice are the same thing." Amy smiled. "Look at you growing as a person. I'm proud of you, Jake. Don't make this weird." Too late. The task force deployed 3 days later. Jake monitored their progress from Crossroads, providing remote tactical support when needed. It was strange, watching others do the work he had always done himself, but it was also oddly satisfying seeing his training pay off. The operation was successful. The extremist cell was dismantled with minimal casualties, and the Joint Task Force worked together flawlessly. It was hailed as a major victory for the Alliance, proof that humans and Valorians could cooperate even in military operations. When news of the success reached Crossroads, Lyra found Jake in the security center watching the mission reports. "Your students did well," she said. "They did, maybe better than I would have done alone. Because they worked together, combined their strengths." Lyra moved closer. "Like we're learning to do." Jake turned to face her.
"Lyra, I need to tell you something."
"The past 6 months being married to you, it's changed me. I'm still a soldier. I'll always be a soldier, but I'm learning that being a soldier doesn't mean I can only know war. What else can you know? Peace gardening teaching you." Jake took her hands in his. "I was built for war, trained for combat, shaped by violence. But I'm choosing to build something different with that strength. I'm choosing to protect peace rather than make war. And I'm choosing you, Lyra. Not because anyone ordered me to, but because you've shown me there's more to life than combat." Lyra's eyes filled with tears. "Jake, I've been so frightened. Frightened of what you are, what you can do. But I'm learning that strength like yours, directed toward protection rather than destruction, is exactly what we need. You were built for war, but you're becoming a guardian of peace. Is there a difference? Yes, a warrior seeks conflict. A guardian prevents it. You're learning to be a guardian, Jake. And that's more important than being just a soldier." They stood together in the security center, surrounded by monitors and tactical displays, 2 people from different worlds building something that neither had expected. It wasn't easy. There were still difficult days.